tonight.
I stand on a stool, drop a tool, and get my shirt stuck. Okay, guys. Probably get sued over that, and they'll take all $7 I've earned on this channel. Anyway, guys, it is part 2. This is day 1 still, but I had to split the video because it was like 17,400 hours long, and nobody would watch that. So we split it into 2. Today we're going to be installing a lift on the Ferrari so we can go off-roading, obviously. Just kidding. Actually, today we're going to be pulling out the motor, so stay tuned, guys. Now, I'm obviously using a lift, which makes it very, very easy, but you can do this on the ground with jacks and jack stands. There's plenty of examples on the forums of people doing this. It's totally doable, guys. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so compression check is done. It's about time to start working on the car. Real quick, just a couple quick bits of advice. So you got to stay very organized. We're going to be taking a lot of stuff off the car. So there's 2 ways I do it. If you have a lot of room, just set things out kind of in the order you got them. I try to keep screws with the actual article, but whatever way works for you. Another way I do it is just I'll put them on a piece of paper and I'll write what they are here. And if you ever take off anything that are different lengths, note that. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the battery, and while we're still clean, we're going to go ahead and take the wiring harness out of the car, and then we're going to start taking everything apart. Easiest battery disconnect ever. Just turn that. Go ahead and take off the ECU, undo this clamp. Now we've unplugged the computer, and this part is going to go through that hole when we remove the motor. So as we're about to get started, it's good just to go ahead and remove this out of the way. There's 4 10mm bolts that hold it on. And you're definitely going to need a helper to get this guy out. Okay, so kind of a quick overview of things that have to be done. Air boxes and stuff all have to be removed. We have to lay on top of the motor to start undoing everything on the back side. But before we even get there, we're going to take the bumper off and the whole exhaust system. So what you're going to do is there's a lot of risk of it bumping here. So I go ahead and mask everything up with masking tape around the bumper so it doesn't get beat up, or the fenders. You can either use those fancy covers, or I just use towels. I think they're softer on the paint anyway to use towels, just so we don't scratch the car up when we're doing it. I think the first time I did this, I just kind of sat around and said, well, where do I start? Because there's so much to do. And there's really no right or wrong answer. Some people start on the top. Some people just start with the bumper and the exhaust. I'm going to start just taking stuff off. So we're going to start taking all the body panels off, and then the bumper and the exhaust. So easiest way, just do it. So every single bolt on the bottom of the car is either an 8mm or a Phillips, with the exception of these back 2 happen to be 10s. Now it's time to remove the shift linkage for the transmission. There's a nut here. Now back up top, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to take out all the air boxes, which are just flathead screwdrivers, and 10mm bolts around the perimeter. We're going to take off the covers with their 2 Allens that attach them. And I'm actually going to put the covers back on there so nothing falls back into the spark plug holes. And then we're going to take the bumper off. All right, now with the air boxes out and the mass airflow unplugged, the next thing we're gonna do is take off the heat shield for the muffler. All right, now with the heat shield off, it's time to take off the bumper. So the reason we had to do this first is there's just 2 bolts there. We have to get those off first. The other things that have to come off before the bumper comes off, there is lights for both the license plate and the 2 reflectors. To get the rear bumper off, we have, I believe, 13 millimeters here, 2 of them, 2 17 millimeters here on either side, plus the connections for the lights here. Now with both, or actually all 3 lights unplugged and those 4 bolts undone, 6 bolts, we can go ahead and slide the bumper right off. With the tape, you really don't have to worry about it because it's not going to get scratched up. All right, now you can see the bumper off and our capristo is exposed. So the next thing we got to do is actually physically remove the capristo. That involves undoing, you can do just these clamps. We're going to do all 4 because I'm replacing all these bolts. So we're going to do all 4 of these bolts first. And then up here on the top, you can see where the muffler bolts in up top, here and here. And then as well as on the bypass valve. We've started accumulating quite a pile here. As you can see, I try to keep everything nice and orderly. This is just my technique. You can use whatever organizing technique that you use. Over at the car, like I said, the muffler's out. And kind of a silly thing Ferrari did, when they put the, this is the sway bar here, and this is part of the frame. These things stay in place while everything else drops out. But because this goes over it, you can't drop it out unless you remove all this stuff. Otherwise, you would have been able to drop everything down altogether. Okay, we're looking at this and you're probably going, wow, that looks overwhelming. It can be overwhelming if you're looking at it all together. A good way to describe this project is it's not so much one giant job, it's 1,000 little jobs, okay? So the next thing I'm gonna do is take off this guy. We're gonna remove the pipe that goes to the headers, some kind of exhaust gas recirculation, and then we're going to start removing part of the rear harness that attaches to the frame. So I went through previously when I did it before and I just labeled all these, so they're all, every single one of them is labeled, and all these plugs can only go in one spot with the exception of the these are your thermocoupler ECUs. There's one here and there's 2 down underneath here. Anyway, that'll help you get everything back in the correct place where it goes. In addition to labeling it, take a bunch of pictures. And anyway, let's continue. I would say out of all the bolts, these are my least favorite just because they're always hard to get to. You can't get a socket on them. I did pre-soak them in WD-40, and so at least they're not stuck, but they're just a slow-moving bolt. Luckily, with a little WD-40, these things can, sometimes they come off pretty easily, surprisingly. All right, so the bypass pipe is out, so now we're going to remove this simply by undoing the clamps here, and then also here. So now we got this other car. Also notice there's a little pipe right here. That pipe goes to your bypass valve, and so make sure that you unplug the little tiny hose that was there. Okay, I just got done making like an 18-minute long video showing you how to do all this, and I realized it was just dumb. I'll just end up showing you what I've done now. So basically, this is your engine cradle, this is your car. This comes down, this stays. It's jointed right here at this bolt. So basically, the way I figured this out is start with like a harness like this and just follow where it goes and start unplugging everything that it's attached to that's not on the engine cradle. So for example, these were plugged in here, these were plugged into these things over there. Each one I labeled, but once I freed everything, it stays. So you notice I didn't have to remove the O2 sensor there because it's all staying on the thing. This O2 sensor I removed, put a nice little rubber cap on it because it stays with the frame along with the thermal probe over here. Coming over here to the other side, exact same thing. See, we have this wire comes down here. So these are the thermal probe connectors, and they're just going to go with the car. So we're going to shove that back up there. Again, just note all the routing and you should be good. Now the back of the motor is pretty much done. We've got the wiring harness done, the exhaust done, the bumper off. Obviously, we need to do the engine cradle bolts, but we're going to wait to do that the last. So we obviously need to do the front of the motor. We're going to get there in a second. But right now we're going to move on to the oil. So drain the oil. If you want to know how to do that, just watch my YouTube video I have for oil change on that. You're going to drain most of it out here. The rest of it comes out the tank. And then lastly, once you've got that all drained, you need to unhook the oil cooler. So there's a line here we're going to undo, and careful about a quart and a half oil comes off. Then the second one is this one way up there. We're going to undo that, and that way the oil cooler is free from the system. And then you see way up there at the very tippy top, there is a bolt that bolts the oil tank to the car. That needs to come out because the oil tank is going to stay on the cradle when it comes out. Kind of interesting thing about this bolt, because of its location with the oil tank, I couldn't get anything with a thicker wall in there, so I'm using a 1/4 inch socket. What we're also going to do real quick is go ahead and protect all our oil fittings by putting a plastic bag or something over them with a zip tie so no contaminants get inside there. Okay, so now I've just taken plastic bags and kind of zip tied these away just so nothing gets in any of the holes. So now next thing we're going to move on to in fluid wise is draining the radiator. So there are drains on the bottom of either side. She's a nice big flathead. Get a little shower. So now radiators are drained. So let's go ahead and finish up the side. I forgot about this bolt. This is the main power bus connection. So this guy's got to come off. We'll go back in the fender and finish up everything in here. We got one more connection. I think this is the ABS sensor here. All right, so now we are to one of the first brake lines that we got to undo. I think there's just two. And then the clutch line. I guess we got to remember that there is a ground on that P-clip. I guess one good thing about making a video for you guys is it's making a video for me too. So anyway, let's move that out of the way. Like I'm doing on almost all my hardware, if I can, I put it right back where it goes. That way I'll never lose it. I like these little caps. I mean, they're a lot easier than trying to find the right thread, you know, plug to put on there, and I always lose those plugs anyway. All right, so now the back is done, the right side's done. So let's go over and finish up the driver's side. On the driver's side, kind of same things. We got the clutch line. Now my clutch line is going to look a little different because, like I said, this one is a converted car from an F1. So the clutch line is the only fabricated thing on here. But to the parking brake and the brake line on this side. And then we got some stuff up here I'm going to show you that we got to disconnect. So we'll start with the parking brake. You can undo the spring with just a set of pliers. Now you need to get two 13mm wrenches on there. The first one's really hard, so I have this really thin one that works great. And then we're just going to break it free. Take it all the way off. All right, we got another brake line here to undo. So we're going to undo it just from this side. Obviously, make sure you clean up any brake fluid real quick. All right, so I'm literally standing where the muffler is, and it's time to start undoing the front of the motor, I guess you call it. This is kind of the tedious stuff just because it's jammed back there. But if you remove the muffler and you can stand here, it gives you plenty of access to get in here. So apologize for holding the phone. There's really not a better way to do this. So here's the plan. We need to remove the fuel block. The fuel block is held in by these two Allen bolts right here. And then there's two connections over here for the fuel line. Two connections on this side, and then it'll gently swing out of the way, and we'll attach it over here. And then below this, you're going to see all these lines. So I know this looks a little overwhelming. We got a hose clamp there, and basically they're all the coolant lines to these tubes that go back and forth that make up the coolant system between the radiators. So that is going to be the first step. So I'm going to figure out a way to film this and let you guys watch. All right, so we're going to start undoing. First, we're going to start with the fuel lines. Obviously, when you take these fuel lines off, you're going to want to make sure that you clean up any fuel spills before it starts dripping on your belts or your paint or anything like that at all. So I got a nice assortment of racks. I'm going to start with this bottom right one. So we're popping these off and immediately putting on like a cap just so it doesn't spill fuel anywhere. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. If you're ever watching this and going, wow, that looks, I think I could do the lot better he could. Okay, try holding a camera and doing it one-handed. Definitely makes everything a lot harder. Next step is we're going to take a 5mm Allen on a ratchet and undo just these two bolts right here. So worst case scenario happened, well, sort of. I dropped my 5mm socket down there, so I had to get a different Allen. Positive bolt control. All right, so the fuel block has now been undone. So we should be able to gently take this. Try not to drip any fuel out. We're just gonna pull him away and over to here. So that does two things. A, they needed to come off anyway, but B, they give us a lot more room to work now on the hoses. All right, so now we're going to take an assortment of different extensions with our 6mm, and we're just going to start undoing all these hoses. So we can start with some of the big lines first. One little tip is be careful not to break your glass when you're back here with your ratchet. Okay, so we got the hose clamp off this main hose. You can kind of get your fingers in below it and just push, work itself around, come undone. Again, we're going to start making a kind of a mess underneath the car. That's why we did a lot of the under stuff first. Now we're going to move on to this big hose here. Same thing, we've already loosened the clamp, mostly. Okay, we're going to go and get this coolant tank out of here. So go and undo these two lines. I labeled one passenger side just so I know where it goes when we're done. All right, and now on the underside, you're going to see two more hoses that need to be disconnected. Again, a lot of these hoses can either be disconnected at the firewall or at the whatever component they're bolted to. We're going to go ahead and just do it here. All right, next step, once you get the coolant reservoir out, you can see this was the one on the passenger side. Driver's side, I put the clamps back on there. So now we need to get the throttle out, which is actually very easy. You can just manually actuate this, pull it out. Throttle is now released. Next pipe is going to be this S pipe. It's one of the harder pipes to get. However, if you remove this one completely, it becomes very easy to get. All right, now last part of the throttle. You see over here, the throttle is anchored to the thermostat housing via this bolt right here. Now the throttle is completely free, so what I'm going to do is just going to set it around this guy so he's not in the way. All right, so now we can just start doing a quick check. Wiring harness, that's going to come out with the car. This big tube is disconnected. We got our S pipe disconnected. Got our other big pipe disconnected. So now we are on to these hoses over here. So we have two power steering hoses. All right, so now we are on to the power steering fin. Like I said before, it's one of the hardest ones to get. So you need Remember your righty-tighty, lefty-loosey a lot here. Basically, one thing I learned is the top one is the one that spins, not the bottom one. So once you get it loose, so next one is the lower power steering. I guess you can't see it on the camera, but I actually get a pretty good shot to that clamp. And now we're on to, I believe the last one on the firewall is this guy here. Looks like here's going to be the best bet. I already took off the hose clamp. Okay, there's a lot of vacuum on there. And then I know this guy comes off. All right. Okay, welcome to the left side of the motor. We are getting really close to having this undone. So we're going to start with the AC line. So you have to disconnect a couple of these. Some of them are links that can be disconnected here or there. It's wherever you can get it easiest. I believe we're going to undo both of these though. We might do just this one and this one instead. All right, so now the AC is undone. All right, so now the AC compressor is freed. So now we're going to move up here. Be just the ABS sensor right here. Okay guys, so now we have gotten everything done except for the bolt. So I'm going to show you some stuff. So I've gone around and checked it a couple times. Basically, you just want to make sure none of the wires that are here go over here. None of the wires that are over here go over here in all the places. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, a set of 6 here, set of another 6 here, and then the exact same thing on the other side. 2 up top, 2 in the back, all big ones. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and loosen the top 3 of here and here, and then maybe just one of those, and then we're going to go ahead and set it on our stand, and then unbolt it the rest away, and we're going to be out. Okay, so now we have all the bolts out except for the 4 up front. Actually, I already did the other 2. So once we do these last 2 bolts, we can slowly start to lift the whole assembly away. It is almost 11 o'clock. I am filthy and tired, but I started at about 2 o'clock today, and even with filming, the motor's coming out right now. So a good idea before you actually pull the motor out is to give it one more check around and make sure and then you're going to go really, really slow, obviously, because you might forget something or something might catch up, and last thing you want to do is just rip a whole wiring harness. So the one tricky thing you have to babysit for sure is the wiring harness inside the car has to slowly be fed out while the car lifts. So anyway, I'm gonna put this on the tripod and we're gonna slowly lift this up, guys. All right, so we've already had our first hang up. For some reason, I thought these were attached to the engine frame, but they're actually attached to the car. So obviously they got to both come off. Go around and check so we can see that this loom is going to come off nicely. Over here, let's see, that is attached to the engine cradle. Nothing on the sway bar. Over here, just kind of got these looped up out of the way. Continue on. So we're going to come over here, feed a little bit more through. It literally kind of just sucks it in as it goes. So there, I'll shove it a couple more inches. Go back through and check again. All right, over here. Now this is a common thing. You kind of got to push him out of the way and he'll glide by it. If I ever could go back 25 years and ask Ferrari, what the hell? This is what I'd ask him. Why'd you have to make the hole exactly the size of the plug and not even just a tiny bit bigger. Makes it so hard to shove this through. Whoa, lots and lots of that like hits this on the way. Anyway, engine's out. So we got to take a look at this. So anyway, here is the 355 motor out on the stand. You got to check this out. I came over and looked at this. So I dropped that tool earlier. Look where it went down. So just a lesson. When you're working up top, be careful not to drop anything, because I have no clue how you would have got that out. Anyway, so those are the cam covers. You can see all the belt accessories here, the headers. You can now see all the individual throttle bodies all the way through. One cool thing I always like to see is like, it's have like velocity stacks in there. I always thought that was so cool. Pretty cool. Anyway, everything's dirty. I'm dirty, and we'll get some parts and get this thing back on the road here soon. You sure suck. Son of a bitch.
I would help you, but I don't want to miss your video.
It's already messed up. Oh, okay.
It's just a little butt shot.